Copyright History and Music Publishing Revenue Streams, Part 5. Now we're going to talk about movie sync fees. If it's a major film, it will cost more for the sync fee if that music is also used in ads and trailers. Sometimes they just prepare new music for trailers and don't use the music from the actual film for that. But if they do use the music in ads and in trailers, it's going to cost more. There's the main score, also known as the underscore composer. For example, John Williams, he wrote the underscore for many films. Of course, he wrote famous tunes in the film that we all know, But there's the major film composer, and they also, write the main titles and the end titles for the film as well. The performing rights organizations, also known as the PROs, they'll rate songs based on usage in the film. And underscore versus, it's a background where they're not really interacting with the music, as opposed to there's a band on stage and they're playing that song on stage. That's a feature as opposed to a background. Now, independent films, this is where the opportunity for ownership of some of the publishing could come in with a composer, because they don't have as much money to pay as a major film company, and a composer can negotiate if they're a popular composer, that is, to be able to maybe own some of the publishing. But there are step deals that increase as the film revenue increases, and then different rates also for film festivals as well. We'll get more into this later. So let's talk about performance rights organizations. Most countries have just one. We actually have 5 now. We have ASCAP, BMI, SESAC, GMR, and Altrac. And here's a link where you can just search on ASCAP and BMI and see some of those. But you can search all these PROs online. Also, another performing rights organization, but for master recordings and artists in a digital format, which came about because of the 1995 law, is Sound Exchange. And Sound Exchange has collected over $6 billion. So that is collecting money for satellite and internet radio, but as opposed to collecting for publishers and writers and distributing for them, Sound Exchange collects for artists and master recording copyright owners. Of course, the income in terms of what is used on television and movies, it has to be presented to the performing rights organization through either cue sheets, which tells you what song was performed and what time and what kind of usage, or some digital platforms such as TuneSat. Radio, they would normally do radio logs, but now they're using Nielsen Broadcast Data Systems, BDS, to track airplay. And with touring, how do you keep track of what was performed? Well, the group that tours has to provide their set list, so you know which songs were performed on those tours. And then there's also this background music. It used to be called Muzak, but it was purchased by Mood Media, which is now the largest company that does this background music. And you can check them out at us.moodmedia.com/company to learn about it. But they're licensing to hundreds of thousands of businesses all over the world, background music. But as I said before, if that music is performed in a public way in a business, there needs to be income paid for that and a license secured with the performing rights organizations. And then, of course, there's webcasting. And international has tremendous opportunity for performance income as well. I mean, international could be as much as domestic, if not more, as many countries around the world outside of the United States are developing in fully developed music industry, where they're protecting intellectual property and copyrights and collecting money. So there's tremendous opportunity. 7 billion people in this world, 330 million in the US. So there's a whole big world outside of the United States that is going to grow. And many of our students are taking part in all those music industries all over the world. Okay, I've talked about this before. There's no performance income for movies in theaters in the United States, but yes, in foreign countries. This is huge money in foreign royalties. In a short story, in the old days, the movie theaters used to be owned by the movie studios. And their thinking was, well, we've already paid the synchronization fee to put the music in the movie. We don't want to pay, again, a performance to perform the movie and broadcast it in a movie theater. But the thing is, all these movie theaters are not owned by the studios anymore. However, the law has still changed that way, and maybe someday it'll get changed, but that's the way it exists right now. Only SESAC pays on some trailers if they have a log of the music that was actually included in there. Publishers and writers register with PROs. Writers can only register with one PRO. Publishers can set up publishing companies at all the PROs with different names. And the way that money is paid out is you get a license from a performing rights organization to be able to perform any of the music in their catalog. So they're known as blanket deals, and it could be a blanket deal at a store, or it could be a blanket deal for a broadcaster or a venue or whatever. And then they'll conduct sampling to come up with appropriate rates, and also use independent statistical firms. And that's the end of part 5.